Should I sell my iBonds? On today's episode of Friends Talk Financial Planning, we're going to talk about this perhaps heresy about selling iBonds instead of buying them, why you might consider buying them or selling them for yourself today, and what I'm planning to do with my iBonds. Hi, I'm John Shearer, and I run a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin.
And I'm Bridget Sullivan-Mermel, and I've got a family financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois. And John, before we get into iBonds, buying and selling and strategies, please subscribe. It helps us with YouTube. So John, what's the latest? So now
selling iBonds. This is, I mean, are we supposed to even, are we allowed to say this? Like, we love iBonds, right?
Yeah.
They've been a really great thing. But what's happened, what's on my mind anyway, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it, Bridget, is as of November 1st of 2023 here, the new iBond rates came out. They're not just about the same as the old iBond rates, but the new iBonds, if we buy them now, have a guaranteed component. iBonds always have a guaranteed rate and then the inflation rate. For a long time, the guaranteed rate was 0, and then you got whatever inflation was, and that's back when we were getting 9% and 7%. It was all the inflation component. Well, the last couple of times they've had a little bit of the guaranteed rate and then a little bit more. And now buying iBonds, there's a guaranteed rate of 1.3% plus the inflation rate, which is basically 3.4%. And so and if I were to take and sell my current iBonds, are getting right, they always catch up, right? So my current iBonds are getting that 3.4% inflation rate. If I sell those, I buy a new one, I'm getting the 3.4 inflation rate plus the 1.3% base rate, and that base rate stays for all 30 years for as long as I own that iBond. So that's what I'm thinking about right now is, geez, cash out the one that doesn't have the base and pick up the new one. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, is that's what I'm planning to do that here coming up in December.
So let's drill down on the strategy a little bit. First of all, so when you sell an iBond, you're going to pay tax. So you have to be able to, like, okay, I'm going to pay the tax on however long I've had it for a year or two. I'm going to pay that tax. So that would be in 2023.
Yep, that's right. That's
Okay.
right. And these iBonds, I'll just say it, so that I bought them December 1st of 2021. So it'll be 2 years coming up here that I own them. Yep.
Okay. So if you thought, oh, this would be a bad year to pay the tax, or I just want to pay the tax later, you could wait until January 3rd.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't have to pay tax on it until April of 2025. Seems like far long away, right?
Right. Right.
So if you really wanted to defer the tax, you could wait until then to do this.
Right. And the other thing is, if the iBonds, if I hadn't bought them at least a year ago, I couldn't even make this change in the first place, right? You got to wait for a full year to do that. Okay. So in my circumstance, it's like, listen, I haven't bought iBonds yet this year in 23. So that's one thing, right? Okay. If I already bought them, I'd have to wait. And I don't want to put, or don't need to put any more money into my bond side of my portfolio. So I don't need more iBonds necessarily. I want a better rate if I can. So that's where the motivation comes from me.
Right. So this is all about playing the rates.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so you want to get the better rate, right? And so you're saying, okay, let me get this fixed rate, and that lasts for 30 years. The other thing is, this fixed rate, is it like an all-time, it's like 20-year high, not all-time high, I don't think, but like a 20-year high. So that means that this is it might not get better. And actually, it really might not get better than this fixed rate, at least for a while, because interest rates seems like right now they seem to, or inflation and interest rates might be leveling off. So, or maybe heading down.
Well, and think about this, Bridget. Two years ago, the 10-year Treasury rate was about 1.25, 1.5, something like that. Today, that's the base rate plus the inflation rate on iBonds. Again, as you said, hey, maybe things are flattening out with interest rates and inflation. It certainly seems like that might be the case. Who knows? It might come back around, as we both know. But the idea of a couple of years ago getting 1.3%, that was what the longer term Treasury bill was paying, or Treasury bond. And now we're getting that plus the inflation component. You go like, hey, it seems like it could be a decent deal. If that base rate does go up more, guess what? In a couple of years, we can go and do the same thing and make this exchange and get the newer, higher rate potentially, right? Yeah. So you're not locked in, other than that first year you can't sell, but after that we still have flexibility, right?
Yeah. And so let's talk also about just kind of, we're going to drill down on the timing of it a little bit. So we already talked about like, okay, you could wait until there might be a tax reason you might want to wait until 2024, or because you can't get more iBonds yet. So those are two good reasons to wait till 2024. But there's other reasons that you might want to just do it right away, but just exactly how to time it you could try to make a little bit more money by how you time this wait. And this is if you haven't bought iBonds yet this year, right? So
Right.
if you want and can do it this year,
Well, one of the key things I think is, and we haven't brought up yet on this episode, is that when you do sell iBonds in the first 5 years, you give up 1/4's worth of interest, right? And so
one
think
quarter
about
being 3 months.
3 months. Yeah, exactly. 3 months of interest, right? So think about what's gone on recently. 18 months ago, 2 years ago, iBonds had been paying 9%, and then at 7%, and then about a year ago at this time it was in the 6% range. And then starting May 1st, then it changed down to this, to the lower in the threes. I think I'm getting 3.38 or something on my iBond right now. And so if I wanted to sell my iBond in June or July, let's say I bought mine December 1st, right? And so the rate goes from December 1st for me until June 1st. I had 6.5%, let's say. And then June 1st, it changes. Well, if I sell my iBond in July, it looks back and I give back 3 months of interest. I'm giving back 2 months of that, annualized 6+% interest rate. Right. I want to keep that stuff, even though the rate went down. So I've got to wait June, July, August, September would have been the first time I would want to sell this if I chose to do that, because then what I'd be giving up is that lower let's call it 4% rate. Right. It makes it easy to do math when if you give up 1/4 of 4%, that's 1% that it would cost in interest. So you got to be really careful on, you don't want to give up. If you bought late in the cycle, well, shoot, you might not want to sell your iBond in December because you might still be getting that 6% rate, or the look back on it as far as 3 months might be eating up some of that high interest rate. What I want to give up is some of the, 4-ish% interest rate when I surrender that. So I'm in a position where starting in September, whatever I would have given up is at that lower rate, a little less than 4%. So as I look at this decision now, I want to do it, in December coming up here, that what I'm going to give up 3 months worth of interest is going to be effectively 1% worth of interest. And then, does it make sense? Like, why would I do this? If I can turn around and buy a new iBond and I have the same current inflation rate plus that 1.3% base, right? I'm paying 1% to get out, but I'm getting 1.3% to get in. So for the first, year, I'm ahead by 0.3%. And after that, I'm ahead by 1.3, right? I get that whole extra amount for the rest of the time I choose to own that bond. So that was some of the math that I did on it, and thinking about like, okay, does it make sense factoring in, hey, I'm losing some interest, and then making sure I'm losing just the smallest amount of interest
Right.
and not losing any of that great 6% rate we were getting last year.
And I can speak from experience. So I have sold some iBonds this year. Okay. And so I can tell you that if you don't, like, who remembers what month they bought their iBonds in or what interest rate they were actually getting? If you log into the site and if you're thinking about doing this move, you're going to need to engage with the site anyway. If you log into the site, you can see what interest rate are they all paying. And I think, when did you buy it? And then you can look on a list that we'll link to in this episode about, okay, when's going to be the ideal time? If you're thinking about selling this just to get a better interest rate, the better long-term rate, when is a good time to do that? Like 3 months after, what? If you bought, and so it shows if you bought your iBond here, think about selling it here.
Yep.
Again, just for the
Yep.
strategy.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the other thing is I think about, and talking about the buying and selling side of things, is that with iBonds, you get 1 month's worth. You get credited interest on the first of the month, basically, after you held it for the whole month, right? So when I bought mine and went onto the website, I kind of forgot when I bought them. I knew it was a couple of years back. It was December 1st. That wasn't an awesome decision back in 2021, because if I buy it towards the end of the month, I'd still get the full month's worth of interest, right?
Right.
Similar thing on selling, right? I don't want to sell November 30th because then I don't get the full month's worth of interest. I want to sell December 2nd or 3rd. Then I got that full month of November worth of interest. Not that we're, not going to break the bank with that, but why give up free money, right? If you see a quarter on the sidewalk, you should bend over and pick it up, right? I'm not saying
Right.
not going to run a mile to pick up a quarter, but if it's right there, golly, why do it that way? So interesting in looking back at what I remember. Hey, I just wanted to make sure I bought these and just didn't think about the timing. So just reminding viewers, think about that timing even within the month on that side of things.
And it gets into the level of complexity that you like to handle with your finances. So if you're like, no, I like to just keep this as easy as possible, then I would say don't really worry about these little timing things. But if you're saying, no, I like to squeeze every dime I can out of these babies, then we're saying buy at the end of the month and sell at the beginning of the month.
Yep.
And I would say give yourself a little cushion. So I wouldn't buy exactly on the exact last day of the month. I would buy, like on the 25th of the month. And I would sell on the 3rd of the month. Because I've just seen enough things in the financial industry that don't run perfectly like clockwork.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to run like clockwork, they're not.
Yeah.
And so to give a
Exactly.
little bit of cushion, I would say on both sides. The other thing I just want to mention is that I recently did sell some iBonds. And so, first of all, it was easy to do. I did log in about a week ahead of time to just make sure that I was squared away with which account it was going to go into. So, changing bank accounts, I recently had some fraud on my account. So I knew I needed to change my checking account number, and I wanted to make sure I had enough time. I wasn't trying to do that on the same day, just for security reasons. I didn't know how hard it would be, but actually it was easy to change for me. And then when I did sell them, it was fast. I got the money fast. It was like a day or two.
Cool.
So I just want to mention that. So that helps with all these timing issues that we're talking about too. It's like, okay, maybe make sure you set it up, but then it should be fast.
Yeah, that's great. Well, hey, I think that's a great place to wrap things up here. If if you have some iBonds that have that 0% base rate, you might consider if it makes sense for you to make an exchange like we're talking about here today. And again, I'm John Shear. I run a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin.
And I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel, and I've got a family financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois. John and I are both proud members of ACP, or the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners, which is a not-for-profit association of planners that all kind of think like we do, tax-focused, holistic financial planning. And so if you want to know, well, we're both taking clients, but if you're looking for an advisor and you prefer one that's local to your area, you can check out acplanners.org.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.